are coming back at you here for episode 20 of Off the Cuff. Welcome, Mikey.
Hey, good afternoon. Number 20.
Number 20. Second run of Mike and Matt here at the Off the Cuff podcast. Well, it's addressed. You look a little different. I might look a little different to the
little hobo-ish, a little scruffy looking. So if we're still in the phase of November here, it's hopefully I can get this out here before the month ends. But otherwise, yeah, we're right in the midst of No Shave November again. It's just our annual little fundraising, kind of have a good time, try to one up the firefighters from their mustaches. So yeah, there's some guys out there sporting some pretty good beards out there this year.
There absolutely is. And we always try to tie it. You know, last year we donated our funds up to an officer in Watford City whose family was going through a difficult time. He was going through cancer treatments. Right. And so we always try to tie it back to something. And I think this year's story might hit home a little bit more for some of us.
Absolutely.
Some of us that got to be here in 2021. Officer Cᴜғɣ, who continues his battle and his healing journey. We've decided to donate all of our proceeds from our No Shave November to Cᴜғɣ. So we're thinking about you, Coop, and hoping you get better. And we can't wait for the next time you get to come inside here. But we're going to put together something for you in case you hear this before then. We've got something coming for you, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, you inspire us all. There's heroes in law enforcement, EMS and stuff like that. And with the sake of almost getting choked up here, but Cooper's really been a strong kid, Make-A-Wish kid that we, it's 2021, right?
2021.
Yeah, I'm able to put a clip on when we do some B-roll here, but we had Make-A-Wish come out and do a phenomenal little one day on the job, rode with a couple of different officers and as part of his wish. And he's just been a tough kid, been fighting this battle for quite some time. And he's earned the honorary title for Dickinson police officers, badge numbers 499. And he'll have that one, that we won't reissue that number out. That's his number.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's stayed connected with us, even though it's been a few years. Mm-hmm. I mean, Coop has been here in the building. We've stayed connected with his family. And so, yeah, like I said, it was brought up, and I think it was unanimous. Everybody was like, well, that seems like the perfect person to donate and to have a couple of us look great and have a couple of us look not so great during the month.
A little patchy here and there. So.
But, so what else? It's November. So some things have changed in the city. We're getting prepared for some snowfall events. And I know there's been some talk in the past couple of years when it comes to the parking ordinance on like, why did we change some things, and thought, well, we could just talk about it, I guess. We could just explain why it is that we don't want to have boats and campers and trailers and such parked from the months of November in through the spring months. Like, what is the reason, Mikey? Yeah,
so it this year, obviously, it's kind of been the exception. Usually we've had a couple feet of snow on the ground by now, but it's coming eventually. It's North Dakota, so it's just a matter of time. And in years past, it's been always a difficult issue for the street department to be able to clear roads and keep the roads clean throughout the course of the winter. And typically, so you get one snowfall, you have the berms that they have to go around, park cars, and now the berms are eking every substantial snowfall after that, eking towards the center of the roadway, and before you know it, the roads are next to impassable. But not only for that, but for a blight reason as well. We want to make sure to keep our residential areas clear of vehicles that are broke down and obviously not running, and just be able to keep our neighborhoods a little bit cleaner. So the city did devise a ordinance here several years back. We're a couple of seasons in now to enforcing it, and that's going to be from the November 1st until April, making sure that citizens do not have any trailers, whether that's flatbeds or goosenecks or anything like that, campers, boats, anything of that nature, parked on the city streets, no matter what amount of time. Usually the vehicles, cars and trucks and stuff, that's 48-hour parking ordinance pretty much throughout the whole course of the year, but specifically here just for trailers and boats and campers. Can't park that on city streets until April here.
Yeah, we get questions by it. Some people don't understand exactly why, but it really is like some of our residential streets. Like if you're on the east side of town and you start driving maybe north of Villard and like the area of Napa,
right?
It gets tight just having two vehicles parked on there, and then when you start adding these snow berms, it can become dangerous. Then you're putting garbage trucks through there picking up garbages, and there's this is the best way that we can think to try to make our winter season a little bit safer and moving through some residential streets. But
exactly, and it's a hats off to our public works staff too, because they're staffed to their certain level, and typically what will happen is if it's a major snow event, the city will reach out to contractors, construction contractors, and have them run a couple plows. But nonetheless, even considering that, factoring that in, the city of Dickinson has obviously grown in size in the last 10, 20 years, and the lane miles of roadway in town, obviously every new addition that gets built, I mean, that has to get plowed and stuff like that. So it does take more time, and if they're having to drive around, park vehicles and stuck boats all the time, that just hinders and slows down the snow removal effort. So there is method to the madness, I guess you could say.
And most of the time, the patrol division, they do a good job. They're pretty complaint-based. They will go out and they will enforce some parking complaints, especially if we have a neighbor calling and saying that this thing's been here for a while, a broken down vehicle, things like that. This one's a little bit different. We do advise our patrol staff. We like to push out some information. You push it out on social media, making everybody aware again. There will come a time where we're going to ask the officers to go out and really start enforcing this, right, and try to get after it before we get some of these snowfalls, because the problem being, if we don't, and we put some berms around it, when we try to tug them out, now you're talking about damaging vehicles, you're talking about damaging, tow truck equipment. So,
ounce of prevention.
Yeah. So if you're hearing this and you have something, this is your warning, I guess, your final warning. Please move anything. But what else? Since we've been back, we took a long time off. This time it's only been about 30 days or so.
A couple weeks, still pretty busy. We've had the patrol division. They've really been hammered pretty heavy on some high incident stuff. Probably the biggest one here, we had an officer involved shooting here just a couple weeks ago. The officer involved with that is doing well. He's been cleared by the Stark County State's Attorney's Office. We've done an internal review of that particular event administratively, and everything followed within the policy and procedures and of that type of event. And obviously our respects and condolences are out to the family of that victim. And ultimately, it just serves to remind what how quick events can unfold in this line of work, and how our officers, in this case, showed us that their training paid off, and ultimately them and their shift mates were able to make it home that night.
Yeah, I guess it was the same day we woke up and we had seen news that Minot had right, an officer-involved shooting. We're going through our day, and it's just like policing. They say that you just never know when you start your shift. You never really know what exactly you're going to come into. And it was later that day. I want to say it was probably our future guest here that we'll be putting on camera here. It was probably the three of us that happened to just be in the office at the time that evening as we're trying to help administratively. The situation had calmed, but now we have a lot of things. We have a lot of processes. Part of the officer-involved shooting process, we were pretty transparent about this in our first post that we put out there, is it's not us. We're not the ones that are going to be investigating this. We did call for our friends that are here locally at the BCI office to come right over. Our job at this point in time is basically the care and needs of our officers and then the rest of our community. I mean, the calls for service don't stop.
Right.
Even though we're handling this, it happened to be a Friday evening. All the calls are still coming in that typically come in from that. So we're looking for other coverage. We're looking for other individuals to step up to the plate and come and answer the call at the time while we handled some of the back end stuff. But like you said, we were, I think it was last week, Monday or Tuesday, that we heard from the Stark County State's Attorney's Office, and that's after a full investigation was done by the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Right. So it was out of our hands. They looked into the situation. We also had done a review of the situation internally just right to make sure that per our policies, procedures, our use of force, training, and again, couldn't be more thankful that our officers that night were okay, that they handled themselves respectfully, and then we hear, what was it, 2 weeks ago, Fargo had one. So it just seems like, again, like we talked about trends that we didn't want to be in last episode. This seems like to be, for whatever reason, we're seeing something spike here in the state. Somewhat
turning true, yeah. That's and the BCI crew there, like you're saying, we do that for an element of transparency, but they also have specialized training in officer-involved shootings and stuff like that. That's and they're statewide resource in order if that does happen, but they do take nationwide basically training on that to be able to decipher exactly what an officer may be experiencing. There's a company out there, or I guess a topic called Force Science Institute, some very high-level training that goes through the physiology of what happens to an officer in a stressful situation like that, like a shooting. The tunnel vision, how they may not recall some events, but some others may be grossly exaggerated. I looked at the size of the gun that was pointing at me, and the barrel was that big, type of thing. There's reasons behind that, and in order to be able to determine the reasonableness of what that officer is experiencing, it's so important to know that. The people investigating that, so important to know that. So a lot of those officers have that specialized training, and we, again, in-house here, just for those officers, we really train hard on the Graham standards. Graham v. Connor is the law of the land, basically, for judging the reasonableness of force, and that's the nexus that we use to compare both administratively and that they will on the investigations at the criminal side of it to determine whether that officer acted in a reasonable manner or not. Yeah,
it's funny when you bring up the force science, particularly. I didn't know what I didn't know when I started this line of work, and I was about a year into my time as being a deputy when I was involved in an officer-involved shooting. And when I watched the video back, this was before body cams, but when you watch the video back, all I could hear was my siren, because like an idiot, stupid young cop, I didn't turn my siren off. But I had no recollection of the entire time that the siren was even going on. So it's like, it's a very real thing. Some of the auditory exclusion, some of the tunnel vision, some of those things. The human body, when put under a stressful situation like that first responders, military personnel, that they feel, that they go through, it is a very real environment that they're going through.
Exactly. And it almost, you revert back to automation. A lot of people say they're an autopilot. In fact, we have a new officer that I've been onboarding here this week, and the other day we were just going through basically talking exactly about this and stressing the importance of post-shooting radio communication, and how we in the virtual room here that we're doing, or simunition, immediately after the shots have gone off, going through a litany of items, getting on the radio, shots fired, suspect down, I'm okay, and get other units coming in training that verbiage, so that when it comes time, when that does happen, and we did see that this particular type of training that I'm referring to happened in the last officer-involved shooting that we had in 2020.
Yes.
At the apartment complex, reviewing the in-car video from that. That was the scene you were on as well. You were sergeant at the time, and your officers in that particular case, immediately after that, through automaticity or whatever it was, they very calmly on the radio, shots fired, suspect down, getting that information out calmly and appropriately, and just proves that consistent training and intense training, it reverts back to autopilot mode in those circumstances.
Yeah, training is going to give you so much, and then the other piece that kept our officers safe on this scene and other ones is just quality, calm-headed police officers that are trained to do the right thing. They say iron sharpens iron. You can only practice so much, and when you have to get into the game and you have to feel the pace, and that's what experience gives us. And we had our guest last time was one of our lateral officers that we were able to achieve to get. We had another one in Derek Miller that even though he's a new officer, he brings to us just a plethora of experience and time, and his calmness, his presence on the scene on that situation, and just how he was able to help supervision. Those types of things are very valuable.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, we've kind of segued into this. We've been talking a little bit about an officer-involved shooting, and portions of that can involve FOPs, legal defense that we could bring into. We also talked about investigations. We've talked about a lot of different things. Tenured police officers and experience. We could use any which way of these to introduce our guests, but our guest today is Detective Tiffany Whinery. I'm sure a lot of our young guests would probably recognize her possibly as SRO Tiffany Whinery. But Tiffany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So let's do this. Let's just start off, for anybody that doesn't know you or hasn't been around you, kind of what is your life story? Where did you grow up, and how did you find a career in law enforcement?
Oh boy. I'm older, so it's been a long story. It's been a long journey. I've been doing police work for it'll be 14 full years. I'll be going on my 15th year here at the beginning of January. So a long time. And then I worked in a prison before that. But I mean, I guess the things that led me into police work was I didn't really have like an easy childhood growing up, and dealt with the legal system, not on my end, but with like family members, those kinds of things. So when my dad went to prison in 5th grade, I, for whatever reason, would have thought that it would have been the opposite. But I had decided at that point that if I can help families the same way that these police officers and these investigators had helped our family, that's what I wanted to do. And so I had decided about 5th grade that I wanted to be a police officer. And once in a while, things would change a little bit. Like I'd want to go to law school, and then I'm like, no, nobody wants to go to school that long. But for the most part, I always came back to being a police officer. I really wanted to help people. And then I had a fairly traumatic event happen over the course of several years of my life, leading up into my senior year of high school. And there was a detective at that time that I, to this day, still reach out to and still communicate with, Lisa Smith, and she was really just the most amazing person at that time. And she listened to my story, and she listened to everything that had happened to us. She was there to advocate for us. Diane Morrow was the police officer that was involved at that time as well, who also listened, but Lisa really advocated. And so really at that point, I was like, I'm gonna go to school for criminal justice, and I'm gonna be her someday. I want to be her. And so I graduated, I went into foster care for a short amount of time with, got to live, I was fortunate, got to live with a family member. I do have a very caring family. And then I went to college. I graduated high school. I went to college at Central Wyoming College, and had some fantastic mentors there, met some fantastic people, got my degree in criminal justice and homeland security, just an associate's degree, and decided I was done with college at that point. And so I graduated college in May of 2009. And from there, I was like, ooh, what can I do? I'm too nice to be a police officer. Can't be a police officer. So there was a new prison that was getting built, a medium security prison in Torrington, Wyoming for the state. And I was like, ooh, I'm gonna apply there. And so I did. And I did not get hired initially. And I was really upset that I didn't get hired. So I called them and asked why I didn't get hired, because I was in the background process. I was like, why didn't I get hired? And they're like, well, there were just some things that we didn't like. And I was like, well, that's not fair. And so I...
some hints maybe?
Yeah, I'm like, it had to do with like a psychological eval. Nothing that was really wrong with me, but I just, it was a 500 and some odd question test, which anybody that answers a 500 and some odd question test in one sitting, where your choices are yes, no, or unsure, and that's what's going to determine whether or not you're psychologically fit without talking to a psychologist. There are problems with that. And so I said, well, I never even got to talk to the psychologist about this. Like, I don't know what the problem is. They're like, well, no, you're just too good to be a correctional officer. I'm like, well, don't you want good people to be a correctional officer? And so they're like, well, wait a minute. The psychologist didn't actually talk to you? And I'm like, no. And I do have quite the life story. And I was like, no, but it would be really nice. So off of a technicality, I got to go talk to the psychologist, had to retake the whole 500 and some odd question psych test. And I did get hired at the prison, and I was the second academy cohort that went through when they were hiring for this prison. So a brand new prison, they have a ton of staff members to hire. And so they had to do academies starting every 2 weeks to get staffing enough to hire. And I actually graduated from the correctional officer basic. It was a nine-week basic, and I graduated prior to the prison actually opening. And so I got to go work at the maximum security prison for a couple weeks to do some like training and whatnot. And then we actually went into, we gained possession of the medium security facility, and got to go help with the setup of it, got to figure out, where are the flaws, where they're not. With any building, everything has flaws. And that was really interesting. And then we started intaking inmates. And the first set of inmates that we brought in were our out-of-state inmates. And one of those inmates happened to be the suspect in what was investigated in my senior year of high school. And I was working in his unit that day. So that was, I mean, when we talk about things that have brought me to where I'm at today, some of those things are like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm strong because I get to leave here tonight and like I'm doing well for myself and I'm not the one that's having to sleep in a bed inside this facility. But you still have to treat them all with dignity and respect, regardless of what they've done and whatnot. So I worked at the prison for like a little over a year, about a year and 3 months, and decided that I would get to, like, that, yes, although I was very nice, I could still be a police officer. Like, police officers are very nice as well. And so I applied in my hometown in around September, October of 2010.
Which is, what is hometown?
Wheatland, Wyoming.
Wheatland,
Very
Wyoming.
small
Anybody who's
town.
worked here knows that Wheatland, Wyoming would be Tiffany's hometown.
Everybody knows. And if they don't know, they at least know Wyoming because it still holds a very special place in my heart. And so, yeah, I applied at my hometown in Wheatland, and I did get hired on there. And I won't forget when I got the phone call that I had a start date and that I was getting hired. I was actually on my way to Texas to pick up a friend. So I had gotten off work at about 6 p.m. at the prison and had driven from Torrington to Wheatland, which is about an hour drive, grabbed some just a small bag of clothes. My friend was going through some things and she wanted to come home. And so she was living down there. So I was like, okay, I'll get in my car and I'll leave. And so I got home about 7. And by 8 o'clock, I was on the road by myself driving to Texas. And I was at a gas station near New Braunfels, Texas, which is just outside of like San Antonio area. I was at a gas station and I get this phone call. It was around like, I don't know, December 2nd. And don't ask me why I remember dates, but I do. I couldn't remember yesterday, but I can remember these dates. And yeah, I was standing at a gas station. My phone rings, and it was the chief of police. And he said, "Hey, Tiffany, we have a start date for you. Can you start on January 3rd?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He goes, "I'm going to be sending you an email. I need you to sign this offer." And I said, "Yeah, sure. I don't know how I'm going to sign that right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, give me a couple days. I'm going to be back probably tomorrow." And he goes, "Well, where are you at?" I said, "New Braunfels, Texas." But I did. I got the offer signed, and I started there in January of 2011 and loved every minute of working for the Wheatland Police Department.
How big a department's that at the time?
It's not big at all. We were slated for 10 people, including the chief of police, 2 sergeants, and a detective at that time. So then there were 6 officers, but our sergeants and our chief also worked the road. The chief would work the road when needed, but the sergeants were road cops.
So that's probably the size of a department. A typical shift for Tiffany when she's on at Wheatland, what does that look like? Are you coming on work? Do you have a partner? Are you typically rolling the whole city is your own, or what does it look like?
Yeah, typically I was by myself. It was a little bit later when we decided to switch up our schedule to 4/12s. So we'd do 4 on, 4 off. We went through a lot of different schedule changes as far as trying some time frames out and what worked best. But when we went to 12s, it was a lot easier to have more than one person on. And fortunately, anything that really ever bad happened, I was not by myself those nights. So if we don't believe in things, there are times that I definitely believe in everything, because there were times that I definitely needed more than one person, and I was very fortunate that on those occurrences there was more than one person.
Yeah, it's this line of work, you get a little superstitious, and you never say the Q word when it's Q.
No, never.
Just quiet. And
yeah, it's like
just asking for trouble then.
For sure. Yeah, so I worked there for 5.5 years, and I don't know, probably, let's see, 2011 to the beginning of 2014. So is that 3 years? Yeah. Yep. 3 years into it, I had met a gentleman and started seeing him.
It doesn't, that made it sound way worse than it probably was in real life. But so you met a gentleman.
I met a gentleman. I am still with him, so it's not bad. Things worked out. So I met him and we started a long distance relationship. And so about 2.5 years into that relationship, he was like, "Hey, instead of you driving up here all the time, maybe you should go on a ride along with Dickinson PD." And I said, "I'm not doing, I know how copying works. I'm not doing a ride along unless you want me to move up here." And he goes, "Well, I think you should do a ride along." So I was up here visiting, and I came in and did a ride along in March of 2016. My ride-along was with, at the time, Officer Jason Wallace. And so anybody that knew Jason knew that it was probably going to be a good impression. Jason was a really funny guy. And so we had went out and did some things. He went to try and arrest people, show off. This department's really, really cool. I was actually more infatuated with the building. I was like, this building is so nice compared to like, we're in like the small building back where I'm from. We have 3 patrol desks in one area, and then the chief has his desk and our secretary has a desk, and then there's a couple other offices in the back. So it was really small.
Because at the time, our public safety center was brand new, right?
Yeah.
When Tiffany's doing this ride along.
New
Yeah.
building smell to it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was hardly any cracks in the cement at that point. Like,
We almost needed Tiffany to walk through it like you did the medium security prison to find out what we had going on that
Yes.
we weren't even aware of here.
yeah, and I did kind of. I was like, well, you guys don't have a sink in the training room up front. Like, who does this? But no, I was really impressed with the professionalism that this department had. I was really impressed with the things that people had to say. So I applied. I applied here and I interviewed, and by August of 2016, well, by the end of July, I had moved all my stuff up here, and by August 1st of 2016, I was starting as an officer here, and then I've been here ever since and fulfilling a ton of different roles. So,
Yeah, that's the part. I mean, that was a well said career path coming up. A lot to unpack, but I mean, realistically, if we don't jump into everything that you've had your hands into since you've been here since 2016, we'd be doing a disservice, because you have basically done everything that you could do. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the SRO. You're currently assigned to the detectives unit. She's been on bike patrol. Last podcast, we talked a little bit about a situation where we had a negotiator who did a fantastic job and trying to talk and de-escalate a situation, and that's something that Tiffany did and continues to do. But so let's talk about Dickinson PD. And so what about Dickinson PD now, looking back since 2016, has been some of the most memorable experiences you've had?
oh boy, I mean, I don't know. I love my job. There's not very many days that I wake up in the morning and don't want to come to work. I mean, we all have those days where it's like, oh, I could sleep. But let's be real, like even if I could sleep in, I would still find my way to the office, and oftentimes do. I mean, most of the time, even on a weekend, I probably just slip in or come say hi or see what everybody's up to. But I mean, I've been busy. Like the Dickinson PD has kept me busy. It's opened up a lot of doors that at a smaller department aren't necessarily available. So, I mean, it hasn't been easy by any means. Like I've had my bumps in the road and different stuff like that. But for the most part, it's been a good experience.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking about your story and you're talking about this detective, it was Detective Lisa, correct?
Yeah.
So you talk about Detective Lisa and the impact she made upon your life. It would be interesting to have Detective Lisa here. You know, if she was here and be able to, you know, to kind of see and to see where Tiffany was at in this career and blossom, especially being you said that was your goal was to be her in all those situations. And you know, we have all these times where, you know, Tiffany seems to grab these cases. You know, we had one recently here. We had a missing juvenile. The missing juvenile had been gone for, it was days, and then days turned into weeks, and then the weeks turned into, it was becoming unnerving, I guess, in here in the police department. These are never fun cases for us to be holding when we have a juvenile who's left for this amount of time. Typical Tiffany, like you talked about. She finds her way. It's not in your hands, this case.
No.
But she found a way to basically not allow her hands not to be in the cookie dough, and the case becomes yours. And like I said, it was what was it, a week ago that we were able to finally a safe resolution to that case. But it's things like that. It's your work ethic that I think has really pushed you into being so successful in these roles. But your first endeavor that you did outside of patrol work, because patrol work was the first thing you did here. How long did you do patrol work?
Not as long as I think some people would have hoped. But I did patrol for, let's see, about a year, probably just shy of a year and a half.
Okay.
I think I was on patrol from August of 16 until about November-ish of 17.
Okay. Your first specialty assignment then is what?
School resource officer.
At which of all schools too, which we all talk about inside here, there's one school that kind of reigns to be the most difficult and the hardest for our SROs, and which one would that be?
The Dickinson Middle School, for sure.
The Dickinson Middle School. And I think Tiffany still walks around in town today. Actually, it was last week at the city party that you had a couple of grown adults now that remembered you from still your time of being the SRO of the Dickinson Middle School.
Yes.
So what are some experiences? What is SRO life like amongst junior high aged kids?
Yeah. So not ever in my career did I ever want to be a school resource officer. And really the reason why I'd offered to be a school resource officer was, one, there was a need. And if anybody knows anything about me, I'm always looking for, where am I needed? What is needed? And even if I'm not needed, I make myself needed. And so at the time that I said, it was only one school resource officer, and that was at the time Corporal Stocky, now Lieutenant Stocky. And I was like, they were getting ready to add another one, and I'm like, it falls under investigations, and really I want to do investigations. So it's kind of my way of being like, this gets my foot in the door, and then I can do investigations. And I really don't hate like child related investigations by any means, but the ultimate goal was to be in investigations. And I didn't think that I was going to like it nearly as much as I did. And so when I went into the middle school, I am there, and these junior high kids, middle school kids, they are terrifying. They're terrified. And it's just in the sense of they're at that age where, like, at high school, they know the police like mean business, and they're a lot more like mature and respectful. Well, most of the time, more mature and respectful. And then you have these junior high kids, and they don't care. they really just don't care. They're like, oh, I don't like you. And then you get the ones that are like super friendly, and all they want to do is joke around. And hey, Tiffany, Officer Tiffany was what they referred to me as there is, hey, Officer Tiffany, are you going to race me today? I'm like, no, because you're going to beat me. And it's like just learning how to be humble, I guess, because junior high kids are going to figure it out. And so as long as you're humble and you're like, no, you 100% are going to outrun me. Like, I am not fast. I have short legs. You guys can't tell, but I do. And so it was just developing those relationships with those kids. And there are some kids that you can see them, and junior high kids, like, you can read them like a book, and you can see them and you can just tell that something is wrong or something is bothering them, or the behaviors. Like, kids don't just have bad behaviors. There's usually something that leads into that, or some traumatic experience. And so being able to relate in a way without relating too much, but being able to be consistent and fair, you learn a lot, and you really do, like, I really like middle school kids. That age group is really fun. They're trying, they're drama, very dramatic. There's multiple times, and I think even now the school resource officer currently, he's constantly like, these girls are coming to my office. I'm like, let me guess. One friend in the friend group is not in the friend group, and they're having a really hard time because they're being mean to each other. Those kinds of things. And it really is just trying to make your way through, like, what is being mean, and what is a serious issue, and what is drama, what's not drama, and how can you direct these kids in the direction that makes sense, and give them those skills to be able to cope with people that are being mean, and those life challenges. They're being presented with a lot of different things, especially with social media, vaping, to drugs, all of those things. Like, they're seeing it, and it's just trying to educate and gear them in the right direction, and give them the tools that they need at that age, and letting them take ownership for what they have done wrong. Like, understanding that we make mistakes, and as long as you take ownership for it, like, it's okay. Don't lie about it. Just take ownership for it and do better.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of laying the basis of another program that we have within the schools, and I believe you were an instructor for the program.
Are you talking about DARE?
I am talking about DARE.
I figured.
Tell us a little bit about DARE and what that's all about.
Yeah, so another activity that I've gotten to do since being here, and we did have DARE at my old department, and I told them absolutely not, I was never going to go to DARE. So then when I come here and I go to DARE, it's actually really surprising. But DARE is the drug abuse resistance education, and typically when people think of DARE, we think of when we were in school back in the 90s, and it was just say no, just say no, just say no.
Yep.
And they hound that over and over and over and over. And really the DARE program was completely revamped. That's the word I'm looking for. Revamped in 2016. And they decided that cops shouldn't be the ones that create this DARE curriculum for juvenile youth, because we are going to say, just say no, just say no. Like, that's what cops do. We're telling you, don't do it. It's bad. And so they got a bunch of educators, including principals, teachers, those kinds of things. And there's like a whole board of people that put together a completely new,
it's a different curriculum.
Different curriculum. There we go.
The piece that, the DARE program, I'm not a DARE instructor, but I do love it. And I like going. Just last week, I got to go to Heart River's DARE graduation with a bunch of fifth graders. And I think whenever I've gotten to read their essays that they write and they get to talk about, I think the one piece that sticks with them that people wouldn't necessarily think it's in the DARE program would be their decision making matrix.
Yes.
You're really trying to give students something more than just saying, I don't want to do tobacco, because we know that eventually they're going to want to try it, most likely.
Yeah.
What we're trying to give them is tools and decision making ability, confidence in those decision making ability. So I just think that for a lot of parents that maybe don't understand what DARE is, it goes far beyond maybe what we had taught to us in school.
Oh, for sure. And that really is what it comes down to now is decision making. So we really hound on making decisions that you are comfortable with making, and did you make the right decision? So when you say the matrix, it's the DARE decision making model, and it stands for define, assess, respond, and evaluate. So what is the problem? What are my choices? How am I going to respond to that? And am I okay with the choice that I made? And it's very simple. So we go through examples as simple as you have a birthday party at the same time you have a game. What's the problem? How can you respond? Like, what are your choices? Yeah. How do you respond? And are you okay with that decision? And as long as you're okay with that decision, you understand what the consequences, whether good or bad, then that's your decision and that's your choice that you're going to make. So we're just giving them the tools that they need to be able to work through those choices that they're going to be presented with.
And let's simplify things. In all reality, what is the difference? Lieutenant Hanley, you've been with our new officer all week. It doesn't sound totally dissimilar from what we teach police officers nowadays. A lot of times you're given something, you have different avenues. It's not one solution is not going to solve the problem. So it's like, well, what is your solution? What are the problems with it? What could go right? What could go wrong? And then are you okay with it?
Just empowering them to make the decision. And when they have that locus of control, that they're in control of that decision, it's not somebody else telling them to do it. The buy-in is just that more exponential then.
Exactly.
So you mentioned at the beginning of your SRO talk here, you said that you didn't think you were going to like it, or you didn't think you were going to like it as much as you did. You talked about some of the relationships and just in your ability to read the students and kind of look deeper into the students and their body language and things. Do you think that's why? Do you think that's why you liked the position so much? Was those connections you got to make, or do you think it was finally being able to put your hands on maybe what you were wanting the entire time, which was to start kind of molding lives and to be that detective Lisa that you were wanting to be? Yeah,
I think I liked it so much because the relationships that you build, and not just with students, but with staff too. Like we oftentimes forget that the teachers are also having to deal with all of these same students. They're seeing the same things that we're seeing all the time in their classrooms. They're dealing with all those issues. And so building those relationships, and I formed many, many relationships. I learned a lot of various resources that sometimes we aren't aware of that we can now offer families, we can offer students, those kinds of things. And then being able to just listen to those kids and let them feel like they're heard, that's a big thing. And that, I think that's why I liked it so much, is because my big thing is just listening to people and letting them feel like they're heard, and letting them be able to tell their story without fear of being judged or ridiculed or told that they're wrong.
Yeah. So you spent some time in the middle school. How many years are you SROing in the middle school?
I did 4 school years in the middle school.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be going through, but it's interesting, at least, because then you got to see your 6th graders that came in. You got to see them all the way through, and then you even got one class on the back end of that. So I mean, it's something, I guess, that not all of our SROs get to see that. Not all of our SROs get to like, we have Officer Kayla right now in the high school, and she's been at she's going into her second year, but who knows if she's going to be able to watch those freshmen walk down the graduation aisle, because it becomes very real, like you talked about. I mean, your relationships become very real with these students. What made you move on? What happened?
So, I mean, just like any other thing, sometimes change is good. I mean, we all became police officers for a variety of reasons, but one of the bigger reasons is because we don't like monotony, and we don't like boredom. We're not made for the office setting, as far as like doing the same thing over and over and over every day. And really, although things are different in the school, oftentimes they are the same. You're dealing with some of the same behavior issues. You're dealing with the same parents. You're dealing with, those kinds of things. And so some of it was there was an opening in investigations, and really that was my ultimate goal from the beginning, was to always be in investigations. And so at the end of at the end of the fourth year, it was I felt like it was my time to move on, let somebody else move in there. We have a lot of people that are interested in being an SRO, which is very different than when I became an SRO.
Yeah.
And so it was a prime opportunity for me to be able to move into an investigative spot.
Mike, you would remember this. We used to have to almost force somebody or convince them that it was going to be a good idea for them to get into SRO.
Right.
Now we hear it from, I would say, a vast majority of our applicants come into this career field looking to try to appease that appetite. They want to spend at least a section of their career inside of the school resource thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we had SROs like Officer Tiffany. We have SROs like currently we've got Officer Jarrett Blaine. We've got Officer Abby Johnson. Justin Frederick is the sergeant. I mean, I already said Kayla, but these relationships, like the kids remember them. Like, we have all these applicants now that your story to policing is different than my story, different than Lieutenant Handel's story. But so many of our new applicants tell us that it was a school resource officer. Like that was the catalyst. It was, they got to finally see something behind the badge that was different than maybe what they had prospected. Just seeing a police officer on TV, it was totally different for them, and it kind of humanized the badge.
For sure. And I think the DARE class does that as well, as far as like us being in the school, because you have at any given time 6 DARE classes going on, and we're all going in, and either our detective, because most of us are investigators, or you I apologize. Like, we're in the classroom, we're interacting with these 5th graders, and I just got done teaching the last 2 days at 7th and 8th graders, and several of them I had in my DARE classroom too, and you know who they remember? Hey, Officer Tiffany, I was in your DARE class, do you remember? And it's like, there's a lot of kids that I have to remember, but yeah, I kind of do. How's it going? Those kinds of things. So I think any time that you get a police officer in front of students that are trying to make positive impacts, as far as those conversations or those stories or just being there for a class period, they remember that. And my very first DARE class, 7th grade DARE class, has now graduated high school, and I some of them are still in communication with me, asking me about how to become a police officer, those kinds of things. So it's really interesting to see, or you get kids that come in and they're like, someday I'm gonna be you, and you're like, oh, I don't know if you want to be me, but absolutely you can be a police officer. Those kinds of things. So
we've gotten several officers on the Dickinson PD right now that we've had with our partnership with DSU, and that connection that we can make with those students, whether they do an internship, they go into their criminal justice program. We've been teaching in the CTE Center. We know we have Detective Taylor Peters, who's very hopeful that we can grab one of those students, and it will happen. There eventually will happen, and then that'll be like the catalyst. And I really think that it's so good, and it's important that we're kind of prioritizing the Dickinson youth, and we're trying to build up. I mean, I think that there's a sense of community ownership that I don't know that it's gone, but I think that this generation of kids, they don't get enough credit maybe for some of the ownership that they do carry. And so we're just trying to really kind of build that platform. Laterals are great, experience is great coming in, but we do have a lot of talent inside of this. And I mean, you look at it. I mean, Detective Taylor Peters, his class is full. You go to the college, Professor Jennings, he's got full classes of teaching criminal justice. So the talent is here. It's just trying to keep it and keep them interested in staying in Dickinson.
Yeah, homegrown is a lot to be said. You know, there's plenty of us that are from outside the area, bring different perspective. You know, Matt, you're from a little ways away, but this has been home for you for, you know, quite some time. So, but cultivating home talents is really important too. And the whole it's like this big orchestra of a sense of a bunch of moving parts of how we raise future generations of Dickinsonites, you know, or even people locally, you know, between the CTE Center and just having, even looking back at what when I was in high school, the relationship that our law enforcement had at that time with our class was non-existent, you know, and how that transposed into all the crime that was happening on the street, you know, the graffiti and stuff, you know, the underage drinking. But now, it's taken almost an entire generation. But our department's now instituted this proactive approach of school resource officers, DARE programs. You know, a combination of the CTE Center. It's going to, like you said, it's going to take some time. But being able to cultivate that here in the next couple of years, I think we're gonna see the benefits of that very, very strongly here pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's. You know, we talk about it, and I brought up the sense of duty, and I think that's kind of what it boils down to. And it's whether you look at joining the military, the National Guard, whether it's the fire department, EMS that's coming on board here shortly with the city of Dickinson, or police. It's something that it's more difficult to find possibly in an applicant, but it's there, and somebody who I guess could kind of expound. You brought up that you have a tough time saying no to new tasks or wanting new challenges. Somebody who just doesn't know when to say no to duty. I mean, let's talk about some of the other hats that you currently wear. I mean, not only are you currently assigned to detectives, but what are some of the collateral things that Tiffany's in charge of?
Oh boy. I mean, I don't know how to say no, and so I mean, I try to help out wherever is needed. I serve on a lot of different boards. So we have the Southwest Crime Conference that I am the Secretary Treasurer for and have been forever, for whatever reason. Can't give it up. I'm also the treasurer for our West River Lodge number 5 for the Fraternal Order of Police. And on top of being on that board locally, I'm also on the state board as the second vice president for the Fraternal Order of Police for North Dakota. I mean,
and for anybody that doesn't know so I mentioned the FOP at the very beginning of this, and you're bringing up now that, our lodge and what the FOP. Give the listeners just a quick rundown. What is the FOP? Why do you exist?
Yeah, so the FOP is one of the largest police organizations, fraternal organizations, where they advocate for law enforcement. They're constantly watching the legislative bills that are being enacted. They're trying to stand up for law enforcement in the United States when those bills are being made. They're really protecting law enforcement in the sense of making sure that we're still benefiting when it comes to like our benefits when we retire, life after the badge. What can we do before we retire? And we also offer a legal defense plan, which is really probably the prime reason that people join, is because we don't ever want to be caught in a position in which we don't have somebody representing us. We don't expect suspects to represent themselves by any means. Why would we represent ourselves if something happened? And so some of it is just making sure that we're protected as well, especially in a society in which sometimes it might not always look the best, and the people that are looking at that they get to see it after the fact and not at the moment, and they don't understand what we do or what is happening in those situations and the type of stress and trauma and those types of things that is playing a role in that.
It's so easy to look at a situation if you see a small clip or you see snippets or anything like that. Police work in general, like when you're watching a critical incident unfold, it is far from sexy. It is chaotic. It is usually there's really no orchestration, or appears no orchestration is there, and it's really because we're not in control of that. As a law enforcement officer, you're not in control. You're trying to gain control, and a suspect is doing what they can. So that's exactly why that FOP legal defense piece is something that we're lucky enough to have Tiffany in-house, but we definitely push them into that world. Something else that FOP does that's going to be coming up here probably right after this podcast goes live, that is one of the biggest events, and it's honestly one of my favorite. I mean, I attend it every year. It's one of the greatest things that we can do is what, Tiffany?
It is the Cops and Kids shopping event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we all get together. We get over. Tiffany is integral in putting this together because she doesn't know how to say no to things. So
add that to the list.
Yeah. So we get basically just describe. I'll let you describe it. It's kind of your event. You describe what takes place on this Cops and Kids event.
Yeah, absolutely. So somehow I've been participating every year since I've been here, but somehow I want to say it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of started to just take the lead. I don't know who was in charge of it by any means, but since I carry the checkbook for the local lodge, I somehow ended up in kind of spearheading how this event takes place. So we've changed it over the past 3 years, and it actually seems to be working out really well for us.
Yeah.
So now we do a nomination form. And that's available online, and we share that through our social media platforms. If people reach out to us, we get it to the schools, so that way, if they know anybody, they can get that to them. But we do a nomination form, and people can nominate themselves, or they can nominate somebody else that they think is maybe struggling this time of year. Maybe something is going on. There's a lot of different reasons that we get, but the people fill out a nomination form, and from there, we have a nomination committee. It's a very small committee, about 3-4 people. We sit down and we go through all of those nominations and the reason why. Last year we had over 130 children nominated.
Yeah,
and
that's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the really difficult part of this event is funding. And so with the funding of it, we have some fantastic sponsors that almost every year they do sponsor. In a large donation to the FOP, because without those, we wouldn't be able to do this event. And we're able to take anywhere, last year we took about, I think it was 52 children shopping. And so we pair each child up with a police officer. So on top of getting the nominations, it's getting as many police officers as we can in our area to come shopping. I'm sure that you can attest to it too. Taking 2 or 3 children shopping at the same time is chaos.
That was, like I said, I'm with Tiffany in that I think it's been about every year. And Mikey, I know this is an event that you typically go to. You carry a kid, and then you bring the camera, and you do a lot of the photography work. There's been years where it's just been a little lighter attended for law enforcement officers, and you're juggling 3 kids, and it's, I mean, everybody probably has had that sense, maybe growing up, to where I wonder what I would do if I didn't have any restrictions and I could just buy whatever I want in Walmart. Yes. And I feel like that was my experience with juggling these 3 kids. But last year was fantastic.
It was.
I mean, I have to say, just going backwards into that, and looking at it, I want to say that we had a 1-to-1 ratio, maybe even extra police officers there that were just willing to help and willing to help check out and do things. And it's always great. I mean, the community too, when the community sees this, it's just, again, we're talking about humanizing the badge. And it's something it's not unique to Dickinson, but it's something that any police officer that's in this area or in this lodge, I encourage, if you've not done it, you need to be a part of that evening.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to need all the help we can get this year, because I think my goal every year since I have been spearheading this has always to do more than we did the year before. Nobody likes to turn a family down or turn a family away. So my goal this year is 60 kids.
Okay.
So that's 60 law enforcement officers.
Well, there's your challenge to anybody that's listening to this that needs to put their uniform on. And this is, we do it at Walmart. Walmart's been good to us.
Yes.
They allow us to kind of, we don't ransack the store, but it probably looks like it to a certain degree when we're pushing our carts around and everybody's there operating. But you touched on something, I guess, just to kind of spin us into a different direction. You touched on something where you talk about the holidays being different, and you talk about some families maybe that don't have the support structure and things. And I think it's something that maybe you could go into and you could talk about maybe both your experiences from investigations to SRO world to even patrol experience. Lieutenant Handel, if you have experiences on this, you can pitch in too. But this is a great time of year. We talked already. Thanksgiving is coming up, and right around the corner we have Christmas. But this tends to be a busy time for law enforcement. Historically, when you look back in the years, this time frame typically for police officers, it gets very busy. You know, it's a really difficult time for some families and some individuals that don't have the support structure and the care structure. So I guess, do you have anything, Tiffany, that you can share, that maybe an experience or anything like that, or Lieutenant Hannell, also for you?
Yeah, boy, specifically. One of the maybe more just a holiday type story, you know, the added stress and you know, family and stuff like that is you know, having to do CPR in front of you know, a family on Christmas Eve. You know, an elderly gentleman had a cardiac arrest right in the house there, right after Christmas meal. So you tend to see that stuff, and the added stress of the holidays, I think statistically, it increases the chance of cardiac events and stuff like that. And obviously our domestics go up. You know, the uncle that's not liked comes to town and decides to talk politics, and before you know, the cops are knocking at the door. So typically, yeah, like you're right. This time of year does see that sort of things. And our officers are obviously 24/7, so we have to have staffing. So we have our officers that are spending time away from family, so that's a little difficult, but then, you know, makes it up on the back end with, you know, celebrating some other day or something like that. You just kind of pivot, and knowing that your services are needed out there over the holidays.
I think some of it too is we sometimes see the worst of the worst, like, and realizing that this time of year, although good for some and really joyful and cheerful for a lot, there's financial struggles, and there's home life burdens, and there's a lot of different things that go on behind closed doors. And so I guess one of the goals, like even with Cops and Kids, is to help alleviate some of that, not to swing back to that, but I think that's our goal. Is like, we recognize that times are tough, and so not only are we taking children shopping, but sometimes when we find a family that we just know times have been really difficult, and they usually come in from a suggestion from the community, or their story that they write down on their nomination form is just so incredible. We also give cash donations, not all the time, but once in a while you get that family, and you just know. Yeah. And you just know, and you're like, if this can help with bills this time of year, or we can't help you completely with taking your kids shopping because of whatever reason, age restrictions, or maybe their children aren't old enough, those kinds of things, maybe we can help in a different way. And just realizing that there's community resources, and there's different stuff like that out there. Like, we don't want this time of year to be bad for people, but for some it is, and that's really hard sometimes. And so I think even our officers really take that with a really gentle approach, even when they're dealing with things this time of year, because it is hard. Yeah,
and that I think is the piece that hits home for me. Is like, I mean, a lot of my career was working patrol work, and Mikey talked about, you know, just being able to juggle holidays, juggle your schedule, and do things, and you're just really willing to accommodate and know that I'll take the back seat because I'm going to do this. And one thing that's coming up right around the corner is our partnership that we have put in place with the DPA and DSU's Sodexo, which would be like the Perch or their cafeteria.
Yeah.
And it's just another goal of the police departments here, that we're so much, we build ourselves up to be so much more than just, when you call 911, you're going to get more than just a police officer. We're going to be there for you. This is a partnership that the DPA had jumped into, which is fully supported by the Dickinson Police Department. But Tiffany, what exactly on Thanksgiving Day, another mission or another thing that's being carried out that you were a part of again?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, it's the one board that I have been able to say no to is the DPA, but not for lack of participating. I fully participate in all of their events, but we have partnered up with DSU and their community Thanksgiving. Do we call it lunch, or? Yeah, it's a lunch.
It's basically a community luncheon, I guess you would be the best word.
And so we'll be packaging up a bunch of to-go containers for those that maybe don't have places to go for Thanksgiving, or maybe just don't want to cook for Thanksgiving. Really, there's no limit on my understanding is there's no limit on who can go. It really is a community thing. And so you might even catch a few of us that stick around and maybe even help serve at the actual luncheon instead of just the to-go containers. But that's a big partnership for us this year. we decided to do that this year because we felt like our services could be better utilized that way instead of putting together lunches for them.
Yeah, we had typically in the past we had kind of put together some food here in-house at the PSC, and then we would try to deliver it, and we were looking for partnerships. And when this thing arrived, it just felt organic. You know, we already do so many things with the college. We thought that our impact, our community outreach would just be better utilized in this way. So not only you've done the FOP, you talked about the DPA that you're not a part of. You're doing all these things, the cops and kids, you're helping with the Thanksgiving. Day to day, what does Tiffany's work look like day to day? Do you have any time to do any cases, or is this basically is the day wrapped up in all these things? What does the day in a life of a detective look like?
I mean, if you're asking my supervisor, he says no, I don't have any time to work on my own cases. But I actually am constantly working on cases. It's always something, and even if it's not on paper, Tiffany's got something rolling around with it. But a day in my life, I mean, work a normal schedule, typically 8 to 4. Tiffany typically does not leave at 4. And I mean, it's not because I can't, it's because I choose not to. Oftentimes I'm trying to wrap something up, or I'm right in the middle of something, those kinds of things. But yeah, I spend a lot of time either on the phone, digging around for some more information, interviewing people, but I also have all those other tasks too that I have to fit in there. So like today, I have not done any casework. I have not. I got to teach some 7th grade students this morning about drugs and behavior, which is another passion of mine. And then I'm sitting here with you guys this afternoon.
But go back, and when you're talking about your casework and you talk about how a lot of times you don't know how to turn it off. It's something that's very real for somebody who wants to get into investigations. You almost look at a patrol officer with envy at times, because a patrol officer gets a time where that 12 hours is dedicated, that's their work. They have to eat it when they're there, but then they get to turn it off to a certain degree and they get to go home.
Oh, I absolutely envy the patrol schedule. Oftentimes you will hear me in the hallway saying, can we just go to 10-hour shifts? Can we do, can we do a schedule that is similar? I would do almost anything to have some days off during the week. So, I mean, yeah, it is really hard to turn it off. So in a patrol life, you come to work, you either work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., whatever your schedule is. You work your days on, you go home at 6 p.m. or 6 a.m., whatever the case might be, and you're not acquiring any cases in that time that you're off. Whereas in investigations, I can go on vacation and come back to additional cases that happened while I was gone. And oftentimes our cases can't just be closed out. We aren't just going and responding to the scene and arresting somebody right then and there for something that just happened. We are having to actually dig into some further things. We're having to find information. We're having to find evidence, those kinds of things. So we can have cases open for a significant amount of time. At any given time, we're probably holding, as of recently, anywhere from 5 to 6 open cases on each of our dashboards. And my oldest case right now is a little over a year old, and it's because the amount of work that is going into this case there's just a lot to it, and it's not your typical cases. It's an embezzlement case, and it just takes a lot of, when you're trying to piece things together and either prove or disprove that something happened or somebody did something wrong, it takes a lot of work.
And since, our patrol is obviously 24/7, but our detectives, we don't staff 24/7. So how does that work?
Yeah. So we get the joy of having on-call weeks. So between all of us investigators, including the sergeant, there's 5 of us currently. We rotate. An on-call week, we do a week, and then we have a few weeks off, and then we do another week. And so during our on-call week, if something happens during after hours, even sometimes during hours, because we do still get called to the scene during regular business hours, or on the weekends, those kinds of things, then the on-call detective is the person that gets called to go to those. So we don't actually get to shut anything off. And if it's something major, it's very possible that if we're not on call, we might still be trying to call another detective in and hoping that they're available to come in and assist.
That's been one thing. if anybody watches the city commission report, when they watch, when we're giving our quarterly reports and we're doing our stuff, we really try to highlight this. This is something that we do believe that there's room for improvement when it comes time for the on-call pay for an investigator. What they are asked to do, and Tiffany kind of did a great job illustrating it, is it's different. The city holds a lot of on-call positions, and some of those are very necessary, and they would include if a water main breaks and you have water gushing down your road, somebody needs to be answering the phone, and not everybody can be gone. So Public Works is very much so in this. The fire department obviously involved in this, but the life of a detective. Tiffany, how often in the calendar week where you're on call for 7 days, how many times is it that you're going those 7 days without getting any phone calls?
Never.
Never, right? Never, because I mean, as real as it sounds, you're always getting questions from a patrol officer on something, or maybe there's a case where you're responding out. How many times would you say that you've responded outside of the business hours more than 3 or 4 times in that week?
I feel like it always happens when I'm on call. I have some very, very fortunate weeks, but I have some, and we all do. We all have some really terrible weeks. We go Friday to Friday, and if you have a really bad weekend and that bleeds over into your week, like I would say June and July were terrible months for on-call.
Yeah.
I had my on-call week in June, I had some really major cases, all that came in the span of a week time period, all after hours.
Full moon. It's got to be the full moon.
It had to have been a full moon all week because it was a busy week. It was a busy week, and like it's trying to juggle, like not only if we're getting called in, typically most of the time they are fairly significant cases or something significant happened, and so to get 2 or 3 or 4 call outs in a week, that's a lot to juggle in a short amount of time as far as trying to make sure. So you would clear from one case and you wouldn't even have anything written on it, and then you go home to sleep and you're getting called out again. Yeah. Those kinds of things. So there's some weeks that it can be really rough, and there are some weeks that we just thank our lucky stars that our phone did not, it probably rang, but it didn't ring to have us come into work.
So you bring up, you're currently holding how many cases is sitting on Tiffany's dashboard right now?
I do believe I'm at 5.
Okay.
Yeah, 5-ish. I just closed one.
And one of these you talk about is one that's taken so much legwork that it's over a year in the process of turning stones and doing interviews and things. Well, then you're on call and you're getting these 2, 3, 4 calls extra. How do you juggle that? Like, is it all going on to, if you're on call, is it all going into your caseload and these are now yours to work and you got to reprioritize everything? How does that work?
Yeah, oftentimes they are. If we take the call out, it's just the nature of us too. Like if we did all of the legwork in the beginning, I don't want to give that away to somebody else to have to clean up anything that I did. Like I know where I'm at and I know what I still need to do, those kinds of things. We all have different processes in how we handle our cases or the order in which we do things. We have a very diverse group of investigators for sure. But I think some of it is starting to prioritize. So prioritizing is huge. So like with the reason why my embezzlement has been open for over a year is because I do have other cases. And when you think of an embezzlement, you don't have somebody that necessarily got stabbed or assaulted or those types of things where there was an arrest that was made. There's been no arrest made on this particular case right now. So there's not really, other than statute of limitations, there's not really anything that's saying this has to get done today because we have court processes that are coming. And so when we're looking at our dashboards, a lot of it comes with prioritizing in what we think is important or how quickly can we get something done on a case to at least get it closed out or get it moving forward.
But you bring up a good point, and so we're juggling the cases that you're working and investigations work typically are the ones that are pushing out on social media, whether Mikey's doing press releases on them, and we're talking about stabbings, we're talking about sexual assaults, we're talking about major crimes typically is what the criminal investigations division is holding. A lot of crimes, the patrol division is capable and competent and very good at turning cases over that are not into the world where they just get to be a little bit more legwork than we'd like those officers. But there's a victim attached to these crimes. I mean, even if Tiffany, in describing her embezzlement case, yes, we don't have a victim in the sense of that person wasn't stabbed or they weren't assaulted, but we still have a company who's looking for us. So you still have that sense, you still have that weight holding over you that this case, even though it doesn't carry the same weight possibly as meeting a court deadline or meeting a state's attorney's request, there's still a sense of burden, I guess, might be the right word for it, that you're carrying constantly with you because of these cases.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have conversations every week where it's like, okay, my goal for this week is I'm going to get this done. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not always the case by any means, because something else comes up or another case comes in, or it's really hard because when you get a new case, everything is fresh. And so the goal is to try and get as much obtained as far as evidence and all of that goes while the case is fresh, because the likelihood of being able to, if it's stolen property or something like that, or maybe it was an assault, the likelihood of being able to obtain that evidence way down the road when you decide to come back to it is less likely. And so you really try in the beginning. So some of my cases, they might get put off because now I have a new case and it's time to try and find all of the evidence that I can, because at least I can come back to evidence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Whereas I can't go obtain it.
Yeah. Is there a style of case? Is there a particular, I know our investigations division, we don't have necessarily an individual set aside to work property crimes and one to work white collar crimes, one to work sexual assaults and things like that. But is there some style of case that you've gravitated to over the years of being an investigator that you just enjoy sinking your teeth into and working?
Absolutely. I do really enjoy embezzlement cases. Numbers are really fun. That is not to be confused with property crimes such as theft of property. Not my favorite type of case, but embezzlement cases, for whatever reason, I got to sink my teeth. One summer I was going back to college, and I needed to do an internship, and my scheming ways sometimes was, hey, if I can do my internship in investigations for the summer instead of going back to patrol, that will save me from having to go back to patrol, and I get my foot in the door for investigations, right? So I was only really assigned one case that summer for this embezzlement, and it was actually right after COVID happened. So I had already been back on patrol because school had been canceled, and they were doing virtual learning, and so when I was on patrol, I got to help another officer with a theft case, and it started out really small. It was like a theft of property, some checks out of a mailbox. And as we started to dig further and further into it, it ended up being way bigger than what anybody it was. So I got to spend my entire summer digging my claws into this case, and it ended up going federal. And that was really where I found a joy for being able to really, like, it really pushes me to think outside of the box, especially because you don't have all of the information. And sometimes when something looks like you know exactly what's going on, and then you interview that person, you're like, wait a minute, what is happening? Because it actually ended up being some identity theft and some other stuff like that. And so, and then the joy of it being able to go federal, because federal is a huge thing, right? When you have a case that gets to go federal. And then it went federal, and the guy refused to take a plea on it. And so we showed up for federal jury trial. I had never testified in a jury trial before in my life because for whatever reason, my cases just don't go to jury trial. They usually plead out before then. That's not a bad thing, just to clarify. And so we're sitting there, and there's a lot of like moving back and forth, and you can see the attorneys, and we're just kind of waiting for our turn. They're doing jury selection, and the attorney comes in, he goes, has nobody come in here to tell you guys? We're like, tell us what? And he's like, he took an open plea this morning. So he turned down all of the plea agreements, but took an open plea on the federal level and pled guilty to all of the cases and got a fairly significant amount of time in prison federal prison for that case. And so at that point I was like, gosh, these cases are fun. How can I do more of these? But please don't assign me the theft of property burglary cases, because I like to be able to solve my cases, and those are actually extremely difficult to solve. And then I do gravitate towards sexual offenses and stuff like that, just to relate with victims.
Is there one case in particular that really stands out in your career so far that this is like the slam dunk and probably the most fun to work, or one that just the most impactful in your career so far?
Oh, I don't know that that particular case, as far as like leading me into like, I really do enjoy embezzlement. Turns out I really do enjoy numbers. But I've had a number of cases between Wyoming and Dickinson here that really have just solidified that I am doing the right thing and I'm in the right place at the right time. And so, I mean, I don't know. I was barely in a uniform and we're in a pursuit, and it ended up being a 3-hour standoff. And legitimately, if I could tell you what all of my thoughts were, I was still in the passenger seat of the car. That's how new I was. And we're working night shift, and we pull this gentleman over, and we're on like an overpass, and I'm at the back side of the passenger side of the vehicle. It's like a pickup bed. And I'm like brand new. When I say I'm brand new, it was I started January 3rd of 2011. This would have been like Valentine's Day of that same year. And I did like 3 weeks in the office first. So I'm brand new. And my FTO at the time, he was still driving, and they didn't trust me to drive yet, which I don't blame them.
Probably a good decision.
Yeah, it really was. He's now, he's the chief of police now, I'm pretty sure. So it's fine. He survived. But we're talking to this guy, and he's acting strange. He won't roll his window down all the way. It's only cracked just a little bit. And they're trying to talk to him. It was a highway patrol or sheriff's department stops. I apologize. It was a sheriff's department stop. And he's trying to talk to him, and my FTO at the time saw a rifle with some ammo sitting there, which is not uncommon in Wyoming. Everybody's got a rifle. But in February, it's a little odd. It's not hunting season. And so they just ask him if they can open the passenger side of the vehicle to take the rifle out, just for the time being, for the duration of the stop. He'd get it right back, not a big deal. And he put the vehicle in drive, and we're literally right on the overpass to turn onto the interstate. And so here we are going down the interstate, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and we're in this, I wouldn't even call it high speed at that point. The reason why it was high speed is because by the time we got to the next town, he was going 60 miles per hour in a 30 mile per hour zone. So not a high speed pursuit. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And my FTO at the time was like, Tiffany, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to unlock the gun. And I'm like, and what do I do with that? Like, what do you want me to do? And he goes, here's what's going to happen. If he comes to a stop right now, we're going to make this triangle formation. And he's telling me all these things because we haven't had a chance to discuss all of these things. Yeah. I am brand new. And I'm like, this is so much fun. Like, what am I going to do? And we get into Cᴜғɣ, Wyoming. Very, very small town in between Cheyenne and Wheatland. And he takes the exit, and we're like, what is happening? Like, where is he going? Like, there's not really anywhere to go. And we end up going through town and at these grain elevators, which my family used to own. So I'm very familiar with Cᴜղɣ. He turns, and then he turns down this driveway, and I'm like, there is nothing down this driveway. Like, where are we going? What is happening? And he eventually comes to a stop, and we are bailing out of the vehicle. I'm trying to give him his rifle. We only have one rifle in the vehicle, so here I am with my pistol, and we're a long ways away, and I'm like, what is happening? What are we doing? Where do I go? What do I do with my hands? Like, I don't know what to do. And my FTO was fantastic, and he's telling me everything, and he's telling me exactly where I'm going to be, and I have some basic information. Like, I'm not completely oblivious. I had worked in a prison before that.
I was going to say, because you've gone through correctional academy at this stage of the game, but not police academy.
Correct. I had not gone to the police academy yet. Yeah. And so right as we're getting out of the vehicle, though, we hear a gunshot, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, it's real. And the windows on this pickup were so tinted. So when people complain about tint and stuff like that, it is a safety risk. Like, not only for when you're driving and just every day, like being able to see out, especially at night, those kinds of things, but we couldn't see in either. And so we're trying to figure out what's going on. We hear this gunshot. The horses are all like running around everywhere. And we're like, what just happened? We're yelling at him. We're trying to get him to calm down and to get out of the vehicle. And we ended up being on scene for about 3 hours. We could never figure out where the gunshot was. We did eventually, but we're there, and eventually we have the chief of police who is bringing the guy's mother to the scene. And I'm like, this is a really bad idea. Like, I'm not super smart, but this is like, I don't think
Very
she should
risky.
be on the scene. Like, I think that this is going to be, this could not be good. And eventually the sheriff, because sheriffs, they do what they want. Really, he just goes walking up. Like, we have 30 some odd law enforcement officers on scene at this point. It's 3 hours into a standoff with this guy. We had launched a beanbag round into the back window, and it just put a hole in the back window, but
Sure.
it didn't shatter the glass because the tint held it together.
Yeah.
And we have no idea what's going on, but his mom has him on the phone. And so we know that he's still alive in the vehicle, and we're trying to get him to come out. And the sheriff eventually talks to him and just doesn't tell any of us what's going on and just walks up there. And the
Leroy
guy gets
Jenkins.
out. Yes. Yeah. He just walks up there, and the guy gets out, and he eventually does fight with us just a little bit, but he gets tased, we get him in handcuffs, that kind of thing. And we start talking to him, and actually I got to be the one that was talking to him because everybody else is doing something and I'm the new guy. And I'm talking to him like, what is even happening? The sheriff finally comes over, relieves me, and so I'm up, and they're still trying to figure out where this gunshot was. And I was like, well, if the barrel is pointed down, wouldn't it have gone? Maybe he went to go pick it up and pulled the trigger on accident. Well, it did. It went through the floorboard and hit his tire. So that was. I remember like just starting my career, and it was things like that. And it didn't slow down from there. Like, people think of Wheatland, Wyoming, and they're like, oh, it's a tiny town of 3,500 people. Like, nothing bad can happen. There were things that happened just at a much smaller scale than how often we would see things happen here. And so, I mean, there just like being in law enforcement and moving through some of those things and getting to be part of those things, and I got to talk with that gentleman that was in that pursuit. I've dealt with him numerous times after that. And the one thing he would always tell me is that I was always respectful. He locked himself in a bathroom at a liquor store once, or at a bar that he was not supposed to be in because it's a probation violation. And I just walked up and I'm like, hey man, you got to come out of the bathroom. Like, we're not going to hurt you. Like, he goes, oh, Tiff, you're here now. Like, I'll come out. And I'm like, thank you. Like, I don't want to waste my time today. Like, just come out. Like, it's a simple probation violation. You're not going back. Like, you'll go to jail for tonight, but you're not gonna be gone forever. Like, just come out. Those kinds of things. So it's those types of cases, and just the excitement, and it's always something new. I don't come to work today thinking that it's going to be the same thing as yesterday. I'm going to get something new. And I've had some really interesting cases, some very fulfilling, if that's the word I want to use, some fulfilling cases where you really did get closure for somebody that might not have gotten closure before. And so those are, to just pinpoint one thing here and there, it's almost next to impossible as to like why I do what I do or how I do things. There's so many, and I love just about every aspect of policing except for theft of property.
So I didn't know the route you were traveling when you kind of explained this story, this Wheatland, Wyoming, but you're talking about somebody who's 5 weeks into their career, went through corrections. Did you ever feel at any moment during that pursuit that it was too big for you, or did you almost feel at home, that was almost a sense of like, was just like, that was your first moment? Because I think the original question from LT was, what was that moment? What was the, that pinnacle? And you went into the story basically just right out of the gate. So I'm curious to you, was that almost the first moment that Tiffany knew, you know what, that psychologist said I'm too nice for policing, but I actually feel really at home here? I
wouldn't say that was not the very first moment that I felt like I had made the right decision to be in policing. But that was definitely the moment where I was like, okay, policing, like, yes, this is like, not only are there these serious times, which that was a very serious time, do not get me wrong, but this was that moment where I was like, no, like, I am in the right place. Like we had 30 other police officers. We don't even have that many in our county. We had 30 other police officers show up. So at that moment, maybe I felt, no, this is not too big for me, because you know what? There's a whole slew of people that are going to show up if I need them.
Yep.
I think that was the moment. The moment that I knew that I made the right choice was when I was still in plain clothes in the office, and Detective Lisa, she called me. She had just gotten a new case, and she was at Department of Family Services. That would be like our social services here. And she said, Tiffany, I had started with another guy at the same time. So there were two of us sitting in the office just reading policy, very boring stuff. And she goes, Tiffany, I need the chief to bring you here, but I need you to come here and help me. I was like, okay, well, I'm still in plain clothes, and I actually don't know how to do any police work. Turns out I know how to talk to people, because do that in the prison for sure. But I'm like, okay, like, do you need me to bring Mike with us? Like, nope, Mike can stay at the office. I just need you. And I'm like, okay, well, that's really weird. Like, we're trying to learn the same things at the same time. And so I went to the chief and I said, hey, Chief, Lisa's out on a call right now. She's at social services, but she would like for you to drop me off there. And he goes, why? And I'm like, I don't ask that many questions, but
I'm the new guy. I'm not supposed to ask.
I'm new. Like, I'm pretty comfortable, but I am new. And so he does. He takes me there, and come to find out, we had a gal that was, she was just, I think she was 20, let's see, I would have been 22, so she would have been 21, something like that. She might have been just a little bit younger than that. But she was in there with her mom reporting that she had been sexually assaulted for the past 12 years of her life by her dad. And when Lisa had tried talking to her, she felt like she was the only person in this world that anything like that had ever happened to, and that nobody would understand her. And so she had told her dad no, and her dad had left and threatened to commit suicide, and it was a big thing, and very traumatic for this young lady. And she just wasn't really sure like what telling anybody would do, but definitely knew that she wanted to report it, and was actually more concerned about her dad and her dad's mental health. And so Lisa had just asked me, like, hey, Tiffany, can you please just go in and talk to her as a person? Like, Tiffany, you can relate to her. And because that's the case, very similar to what Lisa had investigated on the other side of things when I was still in high school. Yeah. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't have a problem sharing my story. My goal when I went into law enforcement was to be able to use any of my past experiences to better somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And so Detective Lisa story, your goal of wanting it is happening faster than you ever thought it was.
Absolutely. Like I said, I was probably only 2 weeks in, still in the office, like probably just got done with firearms training, barely knew how to hold a gun. I mean, there were a lot of things. So I went in and I sat with her and her mom, and they had their pastor in there. And I said, hey, like, I work for the police department, but I'm not here to talk to you as a police officer. I'm here to talk to you as a person. And my understanding is that you feel like you're the only person in the world that this has ever happened to. And you don't have to listen to my story, but if you want to hear my story, I will absolutely tell you my story. And she goes, has this happened to you too? And I said, yeah, it really has. A little bit of different circumstances, but yes, it has. Mine was my mom's boyfriend. And I said, and so she's like, I'd like to hear what you have to say. And so I told her my story. And by the end of it, the detective, Lisa Smith and Sandy Hrianchek, she was a deputy at the time. She was because they lived out in the county, had gone in there and got a full story as to what happened out of her, which did result in, we were able to locate the dad in a different state. It did result in his arrest, and he was found guilty. There was a bunch more to the story, because there was a bunch more of shenanigans that happened, but it did result in a conviction of somewhere above 5 years in prison, and some supervised probation and parole when he got out. And it was at that moment that I knew that I was doing the right thing, and that I was in the right career field.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense now why you've over a decade plus in law enforcement. A lot of people don't make it that long. They get 3-4 years, they figure out it's not for them. I think you had you figured out your why really, really early on in your career,
Yeah.
which doesn't happen too often. And it's, again, some officers don't find it at all. And I think that's why they stray away from the profession so quickly. That's one of the first things we stress, like the new kid I got here today. It's, remember your why. Remember the feeling that you have sitting right here, right now, because you're going to have the sleepless nights, the long shifts, the coming into court on your days off, the missing the holidays and stuff like that. You're going to have to remember your why at some point. So for you, it makes perfect sense now why you've been so dedicated and ambitious for what you do, because I think you were showing the why very early on in your career. So, and props to you for that, Tiff.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we like to wrap up these things with like, what is your most fulfilling moment? But I just want to echo one thing before I'm gonna put a twist on that question. Which was very early on in this interview or this podcast, you had talked about being in this medium security prison and encountering the individual that victimized you, and he was behind bars. And then you fast forward, you're being told you're too nice to be a police officer. You fast forward, this is right out of the gates, you're able to have like this real impact. And Mikey talks about your why and what you're doing. And I just think that, ever since you've been in Dickinson, you've been partners with Mikey and I just think that you bring such a special quality to the police department. I mean, this is outside of all of your baking that you've gotten into and
carbs for days now,
and all of the sourdough, but it's honestly, your talent that you possess is your relentless, I guess it's just the chase of wanting to put closure. And I think it just goes to your story and to where you're at. And Mikey hit it perfectly. It's your why and you're attacking it. So I'm going to twist the question and I'm going to pitch it to you this way. What advice do you have? We've got a couple people in background. We've got a new officer starting. We've got a whole generation of officers that you have touched, whether it be SRO stuff or just knowing you. What is the advice you give to these individuals that are trying to get into law enforcement?
Like trying to get into law enforcement or already like just starting out in law enforcement. I think those are very different things.
Yeah, let's that's great. Let's do the first one. Let's do that. They just started in law enforcement. They're already here.
Yeah. So I think my advice to anybody that's just starting in law enforcement is to remember why they wanted to become a police officer. I think the why is really important, but I think a big thing too is listening to people. Like, we don't have to agree with people's decisions or agree with people's, behaviors by any means, but listening to them and hearing what they have to say. Like, we're really only one bad decision away from being sometimes in those same spots. And sometimes we find ourselves in a funk, and some of these people find themselves in a funk, and sometimes that funk lasts a long time. But I think listening to what these people have to say, hearing what they have to say and why they're doing whatever they're doing, or those kinds of things. And then on the victim side of things, just making sure that we're not so quick to shut them down or to make them feel unheard. I think the big thing with anybody is, even when we have people with behavior issues or difference like that, they're committing crimes, is at some point in time they felt unheard.
Yeah.
And I think making sure like that we're always listening to what people have to say, that we're never in such a hurry that we forget that there's still a story to be had, and we can gather information from what these people have to say. Like, just slow down, listen to what people have to say, and always treat somebody with respect.
I guess it strikes me. I don't remember what training or what I was looking into at the time, but it talked about something. It's so easy to say it out loud, but it's incredibly difficult to put it into practice. You're not looking for a law enforcement officer to have sympathy, but you're looking for them to have empathy in those circumstances. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. You can have empathy for somebody. That doesn't mean that you're feeling bad for them, but that means you're at least relating to them. You're at least treating them like a human. It's kind of what we talked about at the beginning of this, that part of the Dickinson PD's culture is we really try to just be a part of the community. It's not an us versus them. It's literally just everybody. I think what did you call us? Dickinsonites?
Or is it Dickinsonians?
Dickinsonians. But
I'll have to figure that one out.
Yeah, we're all in this. We're all in it together. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it is just, how would we want to be treated if we were in the same position, and how would we want a family member to be treated if they were in the same position?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So now, last How about if somebody wants to get into law enforcement? They're not here yet. What would Tiffany's advice be to that person?
My advice to that person would be come to a ride along and make sure that it's something that you want to do, because it is not for the faint of heart. There are many things that we have to sacrifice and we have to give up and we have to do. Like, come make sure that you want to, but if you want to and you're hesitating, do it. Apply.
Yeah.
Come see what it's all about. Like, we'll welcome you as long as you can pass background.
Yeah, I use that a lot. Both Lieutenant Handel and I have done work with the department for recruiting, and that's been my number one piece. It's just not every profession. If I want to go be an accountant, I can't just go sit next to somebody who's doing somebody's taxes and try to figure out if I enjoy this. But that's the beautiful piece about police work, is that we are willing. It's part of our transparency. Come hang out with us. You're going to meet us. You're going to get to interact with a police officer on a different level. You may not get to come in the house and get to deal with everything, but at least you're there. You're kind of experiencing some of the excitement that the officers go through. I totally agree with you. I think that those ride-along experiences that we are able to provide, and you hear it back from those people that get to go on them, it's just a fantastic experience.
Yep.
Yeah, and even if you don't get to go to the house, we have body cams now, so you get to watch it live.
This is
It's
true.
like live PD,
But
only
live.
better.
No, well, thank you, Tiffany. We appreciate you coming on and being a guest here and opening up and sharing your story. We do have a speed cuffing section, so buckle
All
in.
right.
Buckle in. We're not quite done, but we appreciate your gamesmanship so far.
Yeah. So remember, speed cuffing here is going to be 30 seconds. It's just going to be some peppering some stuff, kind of let people get to know you a little bit by some of the stuff that you provided us for a pre-questionnaire. We'll see how many you can get. You can certainly pass, and just let us know when you're ready. Ready to
All
go?
right, I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
All right, Tiffany, your favorite author and book.
Ooh, my favorite author and book. Ooh, right now I'm in a fantasy period, so I'm really digging the Empyrean series, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros.
Okay. How about a Caribbean cruise or an Alaskan cruise?
Oh, why do you make me choose? I'm gonna have to do Alaska.
This one's a question. What interview technique involves 3 phases: facts, behavior, and the 9-step interrogation?
Pass.
That's the read. That would be the read technique. Infield or outfield in softball?
Ooh, outfield's the most important, but infield is definitely fun. So outfield though.
Outfielder, and if you're not a police officer, what would you be?
If I'm not I would have definitely gone to law school.
There you go.
Oh, that's
there we
deep.
are.
That is deep.
Well,
Yeah, it's really Like Matt said, thank you again, Tiff. I brought the big SD card out here because I know this is. It wasn't going to be tough to get Tiff to talk here today, and no, we appreciate you coming. I hope we can get you on again, because I think we only touched the tip of the iceberg of what you can offer us and stuff like that. So thanks again for coming on, Tiff.
Thank you for having me.
yeah, and thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for putting everything together, and look forward to this coming out.
Yeah, we'll
And-
try to get it done for Thanksgiving here. It's Tuesday afternoon. I'll see if I can mix it together here really quick, but if not, have a happy holidays, and we'll catch you guys next time.